In 1967, the Doors released their self-titled album, The Doors, and my friend Amir and I are going to talk about it on this episode of Records with Ray. The Doors' self-titled first album from them is my favorite Doors album, by far. I love that album. I love how the organ is produced. And it has all the hits on it. But most importantly, it has my two favorite Doors songs, which are the two opposite ends of the spectrum. The End.
Yeah. Amazing song.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
Which the movie Apocalypse Now made me fall in love with. But on the other side,
that was just like so beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, to use that song in Apocalypse Now, you couldn't have picked a better song.
Grandma said I could have one.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I was just telling you.
Hey, where's ours?
I'll go get you one.
No, I'm just
No.
kidding.
He's kidding.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean that movie and that song,
This is
it's
what
like a marriage made in heaven.
Well, this is what I've always seen with the Doors. They have their radio hit kind of songs. They're like a couple minutes long, but then like almost every album will have like the slow burn. On the first Doors album, it's The End. On Strange Days, it's When the Music's Over. On LA Woman, I think it's Riders of the Storm. There's always the long song. But The End is like my favorite out of all of those, though. Talk about going on a trip when you listen to that song.
Yeah.
Incredible. But my other favorite song is 20th Century Fox.
Yeah, that's a good song.
It's so funny. Because she's a 20th Century Fox.
That's another one of those songs. When I was younger, it just didn't grab me. And
Of
when
course
I got
not.
older, it like, oh God. Yeah, you're like, this is a great song. How did I not like this?
I know. But Break On Through to the Other Side is on there. Which I think is everyone's introduction song to the Doors. And I think what's interesting is I didn't find this out until like maybe a decade ago. But like, you know, the part where it goes, she gets, oh, you know, I guess she's saying he actually what he was supposed to say or was saying is she gets high. And then I guess now there's versions of the Doors album where you actually get that. Where you get the
But
she gets high.
They were editing it out at the time
On the album,
Yeah,
that
'cause
was kind of a big deal, you know. But I like the old version. She gets, oh, you know.
Yeah.
Light My Fire is on the first album, which I love. I love that keyboard solo that goes on forever. Yeah. What I like about the Doors is nobody sounds like them.
Yeah.
It's 2018. I can't think of any band that sounds like the Doors. Now, you could talk about the singing. Jim Morrison has this low voice that maybe Glenn Danzig was inspired by, or maybe Jim Morrison might have been influenced by Elvis or something like that. But there's no band that sounds like them.
No.
Ever.
No.
Do you think, does it all come down to like that keyboard? The fact that it was keyboard driven with that organ?
Well, it was that, but then the guitar style too.
The guitar style?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Both of them put together.
Okay.
You know, because he had that kind of that Spanish feel to it.
Yeah.
You know, but the organs were kind of like this carnivalesque, kind of dark parade type thing, you know, and it was
You know,
it's really ominous. You know?
I never thought of that until you literally just said that. Like a dark, ominous organ that you would hear at like a circus, but like a dark circus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but you're completely right.
Yeah.
But that's the main thing that I loved about the Doors. How did you get into them?
It had to have been the hits.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what reeled me in. But then you start learning more about them, and you go out and you buy an album and not just listen to the radio, and you get this great music, you know. And The End I mean, it's captivating.
Oh, yeah.
And for the longest time, that was my favorite.
Yes,
But
I love that song.
I think over the years, When the Music's Over has kind of overtaken the end.
They're both great songs.
Yeah. It was like a love affair
Mm-hmm.
with the Doors. And it wasn't... It was wild. You know, we've talked about other music, Ray, but like with the Doors, it was just like this raw animal instinct deep within inside
Yeah.
that wanted to come out.
You and I are in the same boat where we discovered this music in the 80s, but obviously the music was already came and gone. But even so, I remember getting into these bands in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And it was such a big deal to me.
It was profound.
Yeah. Because, you know, what was their comparison in the 80s? Poison? Talk Dirty to Me? You know, but the Talk Dirty to Me and like Smoking in the Boys from Motley Crue or The End and like When the Music's Over.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
You can't even compare them.
No, I mean like the music from the 60s and into the early 70s is way so much more powerful and so deep. I don't want to say that like these bands from that time period are that much better, but I really think they were ahead of their time in a way. There's a reason why people still listen to those bands. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a reason why when we were teenagers, I've realized this. Like usually, say you had a kid who's a teenager right now, mm-hmm. they are going to be into music that's usually current, right? They're usually into what's current, and then slowly, if they want to, will start making their way back.
Yeah.
Through the decades. I mean, for you and I, being in the 80s, say the early 80s, you had the 80s, and there was a lot of music that was current that you could be into, and there's a lot of people that's what they were into.
Yeah.
But I had to go a little bit out of my way to get into like bands from the 70s. And then into the 60s.
Yeah.
And I remember it took me even further before I even started listening to music from the 50s.
You're right. My son's getting into the 80s.
Yeah.
He really is.
But think about that. But how many decades? I mean, you talk about the 80s, like, well, about the 90s. Mm-hmm. Okay, in the early 90s, you had grunge. Mm-hmm. In the later 90s, you had the new metal. You know, in the 2000s, you had like bands like the White Stripes and the Strokes. So say you're a kid now. Those are some big jumps.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I mean, you could stay in any. I mean, when I got into like the late 60s, early 70s music, like I was into that stuff for a good solid like 5 years. Like that is all I listened to. It made all the current music that I was listening to obsolete. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I moved on to like other things. But the Doors is one of the big bands, well, that still resonates to me. I feel, we're talking to maybe our generation and maybe like the generation before ours or whatever. Obviously not now. But it always seemed to me that it seems like most guys, teenage boys, have their Doors phase. There's a part in every teenage boy's their life.
Yeah.
There's a point in every kid's life where you discover Jim Morrison and you think he is the coolest thing ever.
Oh yeah.
And then you hear about his poetry, and it's so profound. And you for like maybe 2 or 3 years, you think that like the Doors and Jim Morrison is literally like the second coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all their albums, like The End, is like, this song is so deep. Everything he's saying is so deep. Mm-hmm. And then you discover punk rock or metal. Here's a little tip. Here's a little tip from Ray. Mm-hmm. If you're going to do karaoke, do the Doors. It's so easy.
Yeah.
It's just all low. It's all, you know, the day destroys the night. Night divides the day. Try to run. You know, it's
Yeah.
like it's all low. I remember my go-to was always "Love Her Madly." Don't you love her madly?
Do you do a lot of karaoke?
Wanna do more than I like to admit. But as long as I can,
It's fun though.
it's fun when you're drunk. Oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. And if we don't find that next whiskey bar,